So once again, Brian, Theo, and I are blessed, or I should say Theo, Brian, and I are blessed to be tasting through the Bevan Cellars 21s. And today we're tasting Tin Box, Calixtro, and Sentinel Ridge. And one of the things as we've gone through them that I think it's important for everybody to know is two things. One, the 21 vintage is an incredibly dense vintage. This is a year where you're going to want to age the wines while you're drinking your 19s and your 16s. And absolutely the 14s and 15s are in a crazy, yummy spot right now. But the 21 vintage was incredibly dense and concentrated. To magnify that, our winemaking style is such that we're going from tank to barrel to tank to bottle, and we never rack, and we have all of our solids in our barrels their whole life. We never rack off the gross lees. We literally have whole berries that come out of the barrel once we go to rack the wines to tank to bottle. And so with the bottling equipment today, you pick up so much little dissolved oxygen, these wines don't open up very quickly in bottle. When you combine the denseness and the weight and power of 21, along with our winemaking style, the 21s want to be decanted. That said, they're still Bevan Cellars. They're going to be sumptuous. They're going to be decadent. But the 21s in particular are age-worthy, massive, concentrated wines. And so we start today with Tin Box. And, you know, for Bevan Cellars, Tin Box is royalty. It's been so special to our history. And guys, Thea, what are you tasting on the 21 Tin Box today?
I think that one comment that we made immediately, the blue fruit jumps out of the glass at you immediately. It's rich, full, luscious. It has Oakville earth and a density of texture that is really just plush and full on the palate. The tannic structure is big. It's there.
I found it now pulling forward on the palate though. When we first tasted it, it drew back. Now you're starting to get that front palate. You're starting to feel the glycerin with a little bit of air. Brian, texturally, where does this wine hit you? What do you think stands out about it?
You know, when we opened this wine like 15 minutes ago,
Oh, it's totally different.
I thought this wine was a little bit backwards, and here we are 15 minutes later, and it's dense and it's flush, and it does have a little bit more tannin than maybe some of the other vineyards we work with, but it doesn't feel heavy or dry. And the thing about 21s is they all have this density but lift to go along with it. Just incredibly balanced wines. And
This is Eastern Oakville to me. If you talk about that Eastern Oakville hillside, all of the power, the sun baking on it all day long, this speaks to vines that are struggling because of that sun, because of all those rocks. It's got that hillside quality that I just love from Eastern Oakville, and it's very singular. The 2021 Tin Box is going to be wine to age and enjoy for the next decade or two.
Cheers.
Calixtro. I don't know what the preamble for Calixtro is, other than the fact that of all the wines that come from Tench, it is the unique child. And I say that in a good way because Block 1B South is different and nobody knows why. The soil pits are the same as the blocks around it. There's a slight transition from rock to soil, but from 1A to 2A, this little 1B is just a natural transition. But when you taste the fruit when walking through the vineyard, it's different. And I think it shows in this wine in the 2021 especially. The phenolics of this speak to the vintage, but it's starting to really pull forward. But this is a wine that wants 2 to 3 years. Just like the gentleman, the 21 Calixtro is full of personality and energy. You get weight, you get power. It's a huge wine. But the fruit profile is so different than Tin Box. When you break these two down, what would you, Brian, say that Calixtro brings you that's different than Tin Box?
Yeah, I think Tin Box has a lift and a brightness to it, whereas Calixtro is dark and brooding and powerful and full and rich and intense, perhaps like the man himself.
Theo, when you feel the phenolics on this wine, where does it hit your mouth, and then where does the finish texturally ends up? Once the flavor's gone and you're thinking strictly about the finish on this, where do the tannins end up in your mouth, and where do you get the finish really developing texturally?
In the back of my palate, absolutely. Forward is all fruit. The nose for me, a little bit of that iodine, that crushed rock, and then this beautiful, rich fruit on the palate, and then the tannin kicks in, and it's all through the finish.
See, I get a little bit of acid building up. Right now I'm getting a little bit of salivatory gland activity. If I spittled a little bit while talking loud, I could feel it, and I think that's the acid pushing to go through. And so I think the acid cuts into that wine and keeps it refreshing. But this is a big boy wine.
Yeah.
Is a sommelier, Brian, how long would you say this wants to sit in the cellar until it's truly at its peak?
I think you're going to need to keep this for another 3 to 5 years before it starts to reach its peak, and then it'll plateau for a healthy amount of time.
Yeah.
And Theo is somebody who sold wine at retail at a very high level. What would you have told your customers?
That this is a cellar selection. You want
Cellar
to take this home because it's not going to last long. There isn't much of it, so we're going to take it home. We're going to put it put it away, and look at it 3 years from now. Look at it 5 years from now, and then really enjoy it. And it's going to be in that window, that nirvana window, that happens with Bevan Cellars wines in 7 to 12 years.
This is good now, though.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
delicious.
that's really good now.
It's yummy now. It's going to be way better if you give it the time it needs. I love this one. Boom.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Sentinel Ridge. So Scott Ahlstrom, the proprietor of Sentinel Ridge, treats his vineyard like a rose garden. He goes through and he pulls every leaf that's not in a perfect place. He adjusts every shoot, and it comes through in the wine. This wine always has a sense of love that I feel from him, but I think in the bottle and in the glass comes from its tertiary complexity. It's got more than any of the Bevan wines, this wine shows a great breadth of flavor. Theo, if you just take your first sniff of Sentinel Ridge, is there one thing that jumps out at you, or is it a bushel of things?
It's blackberries.
It's
For me.
blackberries.
It's blackberries for me. Blackberries, that we talked about it earlier, that sort of brambly brush note, and herbs, fresh herbs.
Brian, how about you?
I think there's a wildness to this wine that I think is a hallmark of Howell Mountain in general. And then deep in the core of this wine is a sort of blue patafouille, sort of a jellied core of fruit. It's not the first thing I smell, but it's deep in there.
See, for me, when I smell this, I get the wildness. I get all of the stuff. I feel the nature around it. This vineyard is surrounded by trees and underbrush, and I get all of the primary nature that's around this in the glass. And I get the berry quality you're both talking to, but I think the expansiveness of the flavor profile. If you ask somebody to sit down with Ann Noble's circle and say, okay, identify every flavor you get in this around the wheel, you'd be checking a lot of boxes because there's so much going on here. And then it's Howell Mountain. And Brian, traditionally, when you think of Howell Mountain, what are the textures you get from Howell Mountain? And then Theo, what do you think the textures we get from Howell Mountain? Be the yin and yang. What do you think Howell Mountain traditionally is, and what are we?
When I think of Howell Mountain, I think of rustic tannins. It's a little bit coarse. It's a little bit wild. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, what we get from it is this beautiful ripeness of fruit, ripeness of tannin. It retains that brambly note that Howell Mountain is known for, but like the wildness that you were talking about earlier, Brian. But the balance of this mouth-watering acidity and ripe tannin is so beautiful in this wine. So it's kind of seamless as it comes across your palate, and the fruit is just so outstanding.
Yeah, it's seamless in a massive way.
Yeah, it's a big wine.
It's like rocks rolling down the hill are seamless. And it's not that big, it's not that tannic, but it is seamless in a power,
Yeah,
in a powerful way.
there's a lot going on.
I love the man who farms and owns this vineyard, and my emotional connection will always drive me first. But qualitatively, I don't think there's anybody who can taste this and not know this is special wine. And if you know it's from Howell Mountain, you're going to get all of that Howell Mountain flavor and stuff, but then you get our level of sophistication that's what Bevan Cellars we try to do.
Beautiful.
Guys,
Yeehaw.
boomba.